Okay, so hello everyone who's watching this recording. Today we're going to be talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'll actually share my screen really quickly. There we go. Can you see it?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, and we do have a guest here today. Kia is here with us. I'll more formally introduce her, all of her credentials in a little bit, but for now we'll just get started. So just a little disclaimer, and obviously this is just a recording, so you can just take a break or pause it or anything if you feel uncomfortable. But we are going to be talking about some very tough and upsetting things today. So, these issues need to be addressed. Voices of minorities need to be heard. But that being said, it's totally understandable that sometimes these topics can be difficult to hear, and you may feel uncomfortable, or it just might be upsetting and you might need to listen to it in smaller chunks. So if ever that happens, definitely feel free to pause, take a break, and then you can come back. Okay, so just a short history on the Black Lives Matter movement. So in 2012, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was on his way home from the convenience store. He was visiting his father, and he was fatally shot by George Zimmerman, who was a neighborhood watch volunteer. So just to clarify, this person was not a cop, they were a neighborhood watch volunteer. Um, and he had called 911 to say that there was someone suspicious walking around. And despite the fact that police told him not to follow Martin, who, by the way, was innocent, this was not the person that police had been looking for. He did get out of his car, he did follow him, and he killed him in what he later claimed was self defense, which was a totally unfounded claim given the circumstances. So in 2013, after his trial, the jury then declared that Zimmerman was not guilty, and this sparked the creation of the Black Lives Matter movement by Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi. So since then, BLM has been advocating in cases that are similar to this one and many others. So they cover kind of a broad range. But if you have kept up with the news over the past couple of years, there have been so many cases that have looked like this one and have ended in the exact same way. So what are BLM's aims? You hear a lot about it, you see the hashtags, but what are they trying to do? So the first thing they're trying to do is to eradicate white supremacy. So particularly in the US, but really in many places across the Western world, even in Canada, there are these movements run by, white people who believe that white people should be at the very top. And that's a very simplistic way of explaining it, but this is something that BLM is actively trying to eradicate because it's dangerous, it's not right, and it's just completely unfounded. Another thing, and this is a little bit more specific, is to build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on Black communities by the state. So this is when different governments, whether it's on a very local level or up to the state level or even on a federal level, will kind of have their systems are kind of built against Black people, and it can result in violence inflicted on them, sometimes particularly by the police. But as long as people are banding together and realizing that this is something that can be stopped and should be stopped, something can be done about it. And that is something that BLM aims to do. Another thing, and this is again more general now, is to just raise awareness of the racism, discrimination, and inequity that is experienced by Black people, because part of it is just getting the conversation started. This has been something that has been going on forever, since the dawn of the country. But it's important that we talk about it and we get people aware of what's happening on each level so that it can be stopped. So that was just kind of a short history, a little bit of background um, on the Black Lives Matter movement and what they're trying to do. And now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, who is Hia Goyle. So she is currently in her third year at McMaster, which is also where I go. And she's doing a combined honors bachelor's in economics and political science. She has always been passionate about social justice, working with several organizations that facilitate discussions about feminism, LGBTQ rights, intersectionality, and more. And she does this through social media, art, and debate. So, a variety of platforms in that sense. In her undergraduate career, she has raised several $1,000s for her local hospital, participated in volunteer karate training sessions at her local dojo, and conducted university funded research into Hamilton's food insecurity problem. She's very involved. Hia also strives to pursue further studies into development, public policy, and social advocacy in order to support civil rights movements as well as pave a way for a more sustainable future. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to her, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about how she is involved and how you can get involved.
So thank you so much, Mickey. Yeah, guys. Hi, my name is Hia Goyle, as she said, and I just wanted to add on that I'm so honored to be here and to be discussing the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as intersectionality and social justice in general. It's always been something I've been super passionate about, and I heavily encourage everybody to take an opportunity to just consider going down an avenue that helps advocate for other people, as well as gain insight into how our systems have been established in a way that needs to be changed eventually, because as we know, the current political climate that we live in is very tense, and it is up to us to not only fix this, but to move towards doing something that can benefit a lot of people in the future, because the way things are going right now, it's not very sustainable, and a lot of people are experiencing injustice. And that's kind of something that I've acknowledged and something that I hope that I can inspire you guys to also pursue. So Black Lives Matter is a social justice movement, as Mickey mentioned. So what this means is that it pursues so social justice basically just means that it's an organization of people, so such as Black people as well as other members of the Black Lives Matter community, that are taking action towards freedom from inequality. So things such as income disparities. So this means like some people are richer than others, discrimination such as racism and sexism, or tyranny. So tyranny is a very specific one. And this basically refers to any actions that the government may take that makes you feel less free in the country that you live in. So basically, in short, Black Lives Matters and other movements such as this are social justice movements that are aiming to secure people's rights. And Black Lives Matter is specifically very important because it's become one of the most influential political movements of the last century. Starting off in the civil rights era, it's kind of evolved and become something that is not only known in North America, it's something that's known worldwide for the actions that they're taking in order to challenge current stereotypes and stigmas against Black people and other disenfranchised communities. And one of the things that Miriam mentioned that they are working towards is autonomy and liberty in the public sphere. So when we refer to something in the public sphere, that basically means, in simple terms, it just means anything outside of your house. When you are interacting with anybody in the community, within any sort of institution, or within any sort of public setting, you are considered part of a public sphere. And what everybody needs to acknowledge is that they need to have their rights secure in a public sphere. And those rights mean that they have autonomy to act in a way that ensures that they are feeling free, and that they have the liberty to pursue things that make life better for them. So civil rights are something that are obtained through advocacy. And advocacy is something that has been done throughout history in order to make sure that people are receiving their rights in order to pursue a better future. And it's been done in a number of different ways. So the civil rights movement was something that was kind of characterized by the peacefulness of it. So there was no riots going on, there was no violence. A lot of people just took to the streets, but in a way that secured people's rights without actively committing violent acts, or it could be hostile. And this is something that is often heavily contested. So a lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea of pursuing social justice through violence. However, as we had seen through the Black Lives Matter movement of the last year in 2021 after the murder of George Floyd. When people are put in a place where they feel as if they're not being free, they want to take actions in order to pursue that freedom. And sometimes there is a necessity for a certain level of uncomfortable actions being taken in the public sphere. However, overall, I think that social justice in and of itself is a product of injustice. So because of the way that things have been created in the past, this is the reason why people feel the need to take action in order to fix what has been done in the past. So critical race theory is something that I've kind of been studying in school and whatnot, because it is basically, in essence, trying to say that we live in a society that has been built on injustice, that has created systems that means that some people are going to do better than others. And because of this system, we need to start taking actions as people that have been given less benefits. We need to take action in order to pursue something better. So moving on. Okay, so there's a lot of questions that people go about asking when it comes to social justice. And one of the bigger questions that I find myself asking a lot of the time is that, who should I be helping with my activism? So activism is something that you do in order to pursue social justice. Activism, once again, can take on some sort of peaceful route, or it could be more hostile depending on the nature of the activism taking place. But all in all, I think that the easiest way to answer this question, Mickey, if you can press again, is that when you are committing or when you are doing things that involve activism, you're looking to help as many people as possible. So that's kind of the beauty of social justice. It's not only looking to help an individual, it's looking to help everybody that's been affected by the way that things are established. So moving on to the next slide. And in order to do so, I kind of approach activism through a intersectional lens. So intersectionality basically refers to a form of activism that acknowledges the fact that there's not only one label that people are placed upon. So every single person living out there, there's multiple things that make that person who they are. And because of the way that people have been born, the way that they are can either benefit them or put them in a position where they're being disadvantaged. And I'm going to give you an example of that. So for example, when it comes to racism or race in general, we all know that an individual of color will experience the world differently than an individual who is Caucasian. And this is something that I feel every person has begun to know or has started to acknowledge especially since the Black Lives Matter movement, but even historically before that, a person of color is going to experience the world in a different way than a Caucasian person is. However, if we take it one step further and we think about how gender could play a role in this. So a racialized person, so a person that is not Caucasian and is male presenting, so MPI refers to a male presenting individual, a racialized male presenting individual will have different experiences in this world than a racialized female presenting individual. So the notion of gender also plays a role in how people are going to be treated in the public sphere, and as well as how they're going to experience things in the public sphere in comparison to people that may identify as male. And then we could take it even one step further and think about race and sexuality. So sexuality refers to anybody who identifies outside of cisgender heterosexual norms. So anybody who doesn't identify as male or female, or anybody who isn't identifying as being attracted to someone of the opposite sex, is considered queer or has a different sexuality than most people. And a racialized queer person is going to have different experiences than a racialized cisgender heterosexual person. And so we kind of see through this that there are many different intersections that people are playing into. And another example of this is race and economics. So individuals that have a higher economic status, so people that bring in more income and are racialized, are going to have different experiences than people of a lower economic status that are also racialized. So even though racism is something that both parties are going to be experiencing, people of a low income are going to have additional difficulties when it comes to pursuing welfare within their society or pursuing benefits within their society. There's a lot of things that people of lower income aren't going to be able to obtain, such as vehicles for going to pursue, or like go to grocery stores to pick up food, or they're not going to be able to pursue education in the same way that a higher income individual is going to. So we kind of start to see how these intersections can build and how different intersections can multiply the level of injustice that a person is facing. And this is something that I feel is very important, and something that third wave feminism specifically finds as very important when considering social justice, and when we're considering acknowledging the movements that are created nowadays. The movements aren't just looking to help a single group of people, the same way back in the back during the original civil rights era, their movements weren't looking to help a single individual. We're looking to help multiple individuals at the same time, because we acknowledge that the way that things are working, it's not only affecting one group of people, it's affecting a whole bunch of people. And the ultimate pursuit of social justice is to ensure equality, and to ensure that everybody is given an opportunity, or sorry, is given the same opportunities at every given point in time. Next slide. So I work for an organization known as Stay Woke. So I've been working for them for about 4 years now. And Stay Woke is a organization that uses arts and media in order to acknowledge social justice issues through an intersectional lens. So I've tagged their Instagram and Twitter underneath, so at Stay Woke event. So if you guys wanted to follow and see some of the work that we do, we kind of spend a lot of time creating graphics as well as hosting events that look to raise people, or like usually youth, who want to talk about certain social justice issues. They can kind of have an opportunity and a platform to do so. So moving on from that, I think that one of the things that we kind of need to acknowledge is that Black Lives Matter, the movement itself, has been spearheaded by many Black activists who have also been a large component in implementing meaningful social changes that have resulted in better lives for people across many different minorities and marginalized groups. So when we say someone is marginalized, that means that they are experiencing the world in a way that isn't as ideal as they would want it to be. So once again, the example of lower income individuals, they may not be given the same opportunities, therefore they are marginalized. So an example of the Black Lives Matter movement being so influential is that during the civil rights movement, so right before Black Lives Matter became an organization itself, there was the civil rights movement, which was considered the original BLM. And this movement wasn't just looking to liberate Black people from the injustices that they were facing at the hands of the American government. They worked with many different organizations. They worked with Indigenous Americans, they worked with women, they worked with queer individuals, they worked with another thing happening during the time was the Vietnam War. So a lot of anti-war individuals, they were all working together and banding together to fight for their rights. So in conjunction with the Black Lives Matter that was happening during the time, there was also the American Indian movement, and as well as gay rights and anti-war, as well as the second wave feminists. And all of them worked together to ensure that marginalized people had as many opportunities as possible that they weren't warranted before. So some of the photos up on the screen are kind of showing examples of this. So right next to the Stay Woke event, the handle, there's a whole bunch of that was considered the original gay rights movement. And the AIDS crisis during the time was so prevalent across every community, including the Black community, that gay rights individuals and civil rights individuals such as Martin Luther King, they kind of worked together in order to acknowledge the injustices that were happening during the time. Another example underneath the Stay Woke event is, this is Ruby Bridges. So I don't know how many people might be familiar with Brown v. the Board of Education, but basically Ruby Bridges was scrutinized in her time for being one of the very few Black girls that was studying at an all-white school. And as a result of, or acknowledging the fact that there was segregation in school during the time, Brown v. the Board of Education kind of looked to liberate to this segregation and make sure that Black individuals and white individuals in educational institutions were able to work at the same time, or able to educate themselves within the same facilities and kind of work towards having the same educational opportunities in the future. So yeah, those are just a few examples. And honestly, throughout history, even in recent history, there's been thousands, maybe even like hundreds of thousands of similar examples in which a whole bunch of marginalized groups have worked together in order to ensure that they are mutually benefiting from the activism that they are doing. And that's what intersectional activism is all about. They're not dividing it, like the different groups that are working together, by uniting. They're working towards mutually benefiting each other so that there's more voices fighting for the same causes. And those causes are autonomy and liberty. Moving on. So finally, let's go down to what individuals can do. So as an individual, I think that one of the most important things to acknowledge, first and foremost, is that your activism should be intersectional. So the beauty of intersectional activism is that it doesn't discriminate. You can't necessarily pick and choose who you want to help. The point of activism is to help the most people at a given time, in as many ways as possible. So remember that you can't pick and choose who you want to help. You want to be able to help as many people as possible. And this includes people outside of the community that you were born in. There is no helping one group of individuals without helping every group of individual that has been facing injustice within our system. So that brings me to the second point, which is that everybody has the privilege of being able to use their voice. Even if it isn't your physical voice, everybody has the privilege of being able to ally themselves with people that are speaking injustice or that are being subjected to injustice, and either using their voice to draw attention to the fact that there is an injustice out there, or actively using their voice in order to fight that injustice. And I think that that kind of brings me to my final point. And I think this is the most important point, actually, that I'm going to make today. It's that you need to learn from the best. So I think one thing that a lot of people kind of forget when it comes to pursuing activism is that you are not anybody else's representative. You are their ally. You are not pitying them for their experiences. You are just using your voice in order to create an environment so that people can remain educated and use the tools that they have in their pocket to fight back. So you, in terms of how you can pursue your activism, it's best that you not say that you can understand how somebody else is feeling, but acknowledge that there is something happening that is causing them a disadvantage within the public sphere, and then working towards creating a space for them so that they can pursue their activism and pursue what they need to get done in order to better both their lives and, once again, the lives of other marginalized individuals. So that concludes my part of the presentation. Mickey, if you want to go to the next slide. So yeah, thank you so much. And if you have any questions about today, I've linked my email, and Mickey has also linked, Miriam has also linked her email down there. So feel free to reach out and like talk to us about whatever you guys want. And we were, yeah, like, thank you. I have nothing more to say about that. I've just been so honored to be here and to speak on behalf of something I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. That was super informative. It's a very important conversation to have. Something I wanted to mention is that Stay Woke was actually founded and is currently run by two young women. They were in high school when they founded it, and the organization has only grown and is comprised of young people from varying backgrounds. So it just goes to show, you're not too young to ever be an activist or to just start something or to have your voice heard. So if ever you felt like you wanted to start something like this or you wanted to join an organization like this, now is the time. It's never too late, but it's also never too early. So yeah, that
Definitely.
concludes. Yeah, sorry, was
No. I was just like agreeing with you. That's definitely, yeah, just the approach that Stay Woke takes. I think the fact that it works specifically with youth, usually ages 14 to 24, just goes to show that you cannot be too young to use your voice. And that there are organizations out there, such as Stay Woke, such as other organizations, that can help you remain educated and remain prudent in your pursuit for social justice.
Yeah, very well said. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen. Yeah, so that concludes today's webinar. I hope that that was informative, it gave you some perspective, and is even spurring you to action maybe. because this is a very important issue, and it's something that's ongoing, and it's probably going to be something that's ongoing for years. So there's never a good or a bad time to get involved. Whenever you feel comfortable, now is the time. So yeah, that concludes. Thank you so much for coming.